Hello Automowheelers, and today's video is going to be a review of the Creta, one of India's most favorite SUVs. So let's find out what it has to offer for us. Now most of you must already be aware of the Creta's exteriors, but let's have a quick recap of how the car looks from outside. Now of course this is the petrol version and this is the SX version, SX trim. There you go, that's an angle from the corner, that's the right corner. Moving on, and as you can see, those are the projector headlamps that you get only on the SX trim. The fog lamps. Moving on to the sides, those are the 16-inch alloy wheels which come standard. The ones that you get on the optional trim, the SXO trim, are different and a diamond cut, and frankly those look better than the standard ones. Now the rear side is flanked by two tail lamps which are not LED type. So there you go guys, that's a view of the car from all angles. Now these are the interiors that you may be familiar with the Creta. This one is on the SX trim. From the inside the view of the cabin is quite nice, and you get a lot of equipment on this. Now let's begin with the steering wheel. Now the steering wheel has all controls that you usually see in cars of its class, and which include buttons for muting the stereo, the AV and the phone, and these ones are for answering and ending calls. This one is for volume. This one is for changing the mode on the AV system. This one is to navigate between different modes of the AV system. A reset and trip change button for the trip meter. You have buttons here to control the side rear view mirrors. This one is to fold the rear view mirrors. This button right here is to choose which mirror you want to control, and this one is to actually change the position of the mirror. And then you have a button here which allows you to disable the rear power windows. This one is to lock the car. And then moving on along the dashboard, you'll notice a couple of other things. First one being the engine start stop button. Now let's quickly switch it on to see how the instrument cluster lights up. There you go, there's a nice theatrical glow, lights up gradually. You have a tachometer, speedometer, odometer, the usual stuff. And you've got a digital odometer as well. Fuel gauge, temperature gauge, trip meters, etc., etc. Now moving on to the left, you've got the touchscreen, infotainment system which does not have Android Auto or CarPlay because this is the first generation of the Creta that came in India. There's a small clock right here as well. Those are the controls for the auto air conditioning. Moving on, there's the gear lever, 6-speed manual gearbox for the Creta Petrol, handbrake lever, an armrest for the front passenger and the driver. There's the rear view mirror which does not have auto dimming feature, so it will have to be manually adjusted, which is quite a pity actually. Sunglass holder as well. Two reading lamps which can be independently switched on. The glove box isn't quite as large as you'd expect it to. As you can see, there's just a few things inside. It's not a cooled one, by the way. Now the driver's seat was adjusted to my height, and I am 6 feet 2 inches tall, and as you can see at the rear I still have a lot of leg room. As you can also see, there's still a lot of headroom remaining for me. There's the rear seat bench. It can easily seat 3 and the transmission tunnel doesn't interfere too much. There's the rear aircon vent which can be controlled for speed. But the problem with this one is that even at its highest position, the airflow is not directed to the passenger's upper body. It only is restricted to your thighs at the most. Now let me take you on a spin in this car and talk to you about the things that you should expect as an owner. Okay guys, so let's go for a quick spin on the Creta Petrol. So this car has ridden about 12,000 kilometers so far. It's about 2 years old. The air conditioning in the car works really well, cools up the cabin quite quickly. In terms of how the car drives, well, let's begin with the steering wheel. So the steering wheel is quite light, although that really isn't a great thing because the steering does feel a bit disconnected at times, at least at low speeds. It's just extremely light. But yeah, in the traffic it's quite a breeze. On the highways as well, it does weigh up a little bit, but not as much as you'd expect it to be. If I had to compare it with the Duster steering wheel, I think the Duster's weighs up quite well and is ideal for highways than this one. So the suspension also, it really does a good job of soaking up all the bumps and potholes on the roads, but is slightly on the firmer side compared to the Duster. The Duster's is even better. So if you had to really compare the Duster suspension with the Creta's, I would definitely go for the Dusters. In terms of riding dynamics, since this car isn't all that tall, you don't suffer from a lot of body roll. This car, mind you, is a soft roader. It's not really a hardcore SUV because this one does ride like more of a car and less of an SUV. What gives it its SUV credentials are its suspension and its ride height. The ground clearance is quite good as well, and of course the view that you get on the road is quite commanding. Now in terms of the feel and quality of the interiors, Hyundai has always been known to produce great interiors for its cars, no matter which price point it is at. So same goes for this. Over the years that this car has been used, the interiors still feel premium and have not lost their charm. So they still feel good for the current day and age, although this model has actually been in the market for about 3 years. So that's a good thing. Let's take you through some bad roads to see how the suspension behaves. Yeah, so like I said, the suspension is on the firmer side, so you do feel these big potholes creeping in through the chassis. But otherwise, on smaller ones, it really does a good job. Now let's talk about fuel economy. In the city, this one gives about 10 kilometers to a liter, and on the highways you can expect about 14 to 15 kilometers to a liter, which is quite good considering it's a 1.6 liter engine. So the noise levels inside the cabin are quite low. It's exceptionally low. Hyundai has done a really good job with the acoustics. You really can't hear road noise, you can't hear the tire noise. You can barely hear the engine at idle, which is a great thing. Even when you rev the engine high, like I'm doing right now, you cannot hear the engine rev as well. Now this is the same engine that's been doing duty on a lot of Hyundai vehicles like the Verna, and it really does pull at all RPMs, so the torque band is quite wide, and you can pick up from just about any speed. It's made it to a 6-speed transmission, so makes things really good when you're on the highway. And shifts of the gear are quite nice, really slick shifts and really short throws, which is really good too. The power is available across the rev band. Now this car has been used for about 12,000 kilometers as I mentioned earlier, and so far there are no concerns or any problems that have occurred over the time. Servicing has also been quite good, is of Hyundai standards, so serviceability isn't ever an issue. So the small nitty-gritties that can be spoken about as issues are that the car lacks a passenger side keyless entry button, which is available on the Accent, which is actually a small compact sedan. And other things which are sorely missed are an automatic inside dimming rear view mirror. The other thing that's missing compared to other cars of Hyundai are auto folding side rear view mirrors, which should automatically fold when you lock the car. Sadly, that's not available. The turning radius, as you can see, is quite good. It's quite short. Turning the car around isn't that much of a problem, although this is a long wheelbase car. Now the overall ownership experience of the car is quite good. It's got really great feedback, and by that what I mean is that the engine responds really quickly, which is a great thing for a driver. And even for the passengers, the car is quite comfortable. The steering wheel is quite light and easy to use, although lacks a little bit of feedback from the wheels. So as you guys must be aware, a new generation Creta has also come up, the 2018 facelift. Now mind you, there aren't a lot of differences between that car and this one, and so I thought it would be a good idea to take you guys through how this car is to own. Except the touchscreen and a few extra equipment, you don't get much. The overall feel of the car and the ride is still almost the same, except the steering wheel, which I've heard has been improved. So it's a good thing if you're planning to buy the newer one, because then you get an improved steering wheel and a few other equipment. So guys, that was our review of the Hyundai Creta Petrol. Hope you liked it, and if you did, don't forget to leave your questions and feedback in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Until the next video, it's a goodbye from Automowheels.